Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. We're going to start this series about Edgar Allan, what we do in the agency. We're going to share our process that we do. Today we have Mason that is going to share all the sales process that we go through with clients, with the real projects, starting from emails, sending proposal, how we pitch, everything related with sales. And there's going to be an open conversation, as we usually do also in Webflow Cafe in the Spanish version. So the mics is open. You can, raise your hand or make any question in the chat if you don't want to do through the mic. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's good to see everyone. This is a really good group, and this is our first one, so we're gonna be figuring out some stuff along the way. Also, I don't have like a fancy background. I don't have a fancy mic. I'm gonna be working on a lot of my HV whatever setup, but just glad to be able to go through and share some stuff that we've been learning over the last I don't know. I've been in the agency business for 20 years, and I was fired from my last agency, just to be able to give everyone a little bit of context. And at that point, there wasn't anywhere else that I wanted to go. In fact, like a lot of the hot shops around Atlanta, they wouldn't hire me. Huge and AKQA and things along those lines. I was sort of, I've always been a designer developer, and there wasn't necessarily a round hole for my square peg. And so at that point, I wasn't intending to start an agency. In fact, at the time when I was fired, my wife was 7 months pregnant. We were about to have our second kid, didn't have any savings. And one of the dirty secrets within the agency business is it's sort of, it's an escalator without a second floor. And the way a lot of these firms have been structured, where it's like, you get promoted, you get promoted, you get promoted, you're too expensive, you're fired. But with that, I was able to learn. So at my last job, I was, I was just a creative director, and I would go to pitches and have to be able to pitch an idea, but I did have to think about like P&L, profit and loss, how to be able to budget things, and how to be able to start to connect what we wanted to do from a creative standpoint into the numbers. When I got started, I worked with great project managers in my last job, but I was not a project manager. I was not an account person. So a lot of this stuff is self-rolled. It's self-taught, and it's what I've been using over the last 9 years. I'll say that something I do believe in is being able to start to match up the work with a spreadsheet. So we try to be as transparent as possible with our clients. And one of the things that I talk about whenever we're pitching is that we want to bring, we're not just building a website. We're really trying to build a set of marketing tools. And within those marketing tools, we want our clients to have full transparency into how their budget is going to be invested into their project. And so a lot of this process is about kind of educating them to be able to see like, oh, how this adds up. I didn't just pull a number out. I don't believe in value-based pricing as well. I will save that debate for a later time. But I'm not just saying like, if I was a taxi cab driver and I picked up someone, I'm not going to say, oh, you're going to the airport for a really important meeting. Well, I'm going to charge you $500,000 as opposed to someone that's just going to the grocery store. So we charge everyone the same. I think we do try to look at like, how we can maybe find some efficiencies, or how we can find extra value that we're bringing to a particular client. A lot of that happens with the team composition, or how we're going to be, focused on delivering that work. For today's conversation, I have lined up a whole bunch of stuff. And so I'm going to take, as Felix was saying, a view from first email all the way through signed document. And I'm going to kind of just touch briefly on what we're doing along the way. I've got it kind of queued up here. Let me, I'm going to start to screen share, because otherwise you're just going to be looking at me and I'll be doing an interpretive dance of what this looks like, which doesn't necessarily do much. Also, I would say if you've got a question, I don't think I'm going to be able to see anyone once I start sharing my screen. So maybe just jump in, things like that. So here we go. I'm going to share. This is my first time. Please tell me this works, because we haven't used this before. What is this? Embed Google. So
Yes, have the option of share screen, the first one.
Okay, so let me, oh, share screen. Okay, I was like, Google Drive. No, I don't need Google Drive. Um, so this is our first time to work with Wearby, and it's really pretty. So, okay. Can everyone, I'm sharing a screen. Do you see sort of like the vortex? Whoa, there we go.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So let me just kind of jump up here. So what we see here is, I'm gonna close down Slack here. So what we see here is kind of our full, presentation here. Everything from, how we're going to be organizing things, a real client that we're going to be working with throughout this series. So we're starting today with the pitch, and then next week, Felix is going to start with a live design and build. So you guys are going to be able to, and this is, we're getting paid money and all of that sort of stuff. I've actually worked out some of these details, so it's not just like me picking a, new prospect out of a hat and saying, oh, you're on our stream. And then really kind of going through the estimation process, the response process, and then kind of finishing things out with some of the contracting basics. Let me jump into our CRM, or I would say lack of CRM. So we use ClickUp, and we just have a board here that, we can go in and start to track some of the basics. And this is really how, the deal flow works. So we have kind of like, new clients, people that are coming in through an email, but that I haven't necessarily responded to yet. Once we've responded and maybe set up that first meeting, then that goes into in progress. Once we've qualified them to be able to say like, yep, we have, and let me just back up here. So, we get an email. The first thing I do is I'm like, hey, let's go and jump on a call, because what I want to do is make sure that like we're talking about the same thing. And so before we do any work, I will ask them about their goals, talk with them about like what they're trying to accomplish, be able to get a little bit more of the softer things that aren't always in an email or a document. At that point, they'll kind of move over into in progress, or that I would take them out of consideration. At this point, we'll go through and start the response portion of this. Once we have created a response, we will jump on a second call with them and review that response. At this point, we either go into contract or it's lost. So these are sort of the two binary things. I do have a second bucket over here, which is like sometimes, we move into, a contract. Sometimes it's lost. Sometimes we just don't hear anything. So we have a category called back burner. And so this is just for people that I haven't heard from in a little while, or, it's like, hey, they had a project, but they've decided, that maybe we should check in with them later this summer, or that, it's one and like, we're off to the races. What I would say is if you sort of look across the top here, we have a high, there's a lot of projects that just aren't a good fit for us or that we've lost. And so, it's actually sort of a 2-to-1 between how many we've lost and how many we've won. And then you can see that, there's a lot of work that has to happen in terms of like how someone's starting in progress to, who we're actually sending a response to. And then, there is a bit of like a backlog that can happen into the contracting process. Sometimes this process in and of itself is another stage within the negotiation, especially as you start to get into bigger assignments. If I was to back out here, and now let's jump into pitch. So this is from Pete from Punch List, and he sent us an email this week and was like, hey, Mason, love to be able to talk with you and your team about, redesigning our site. As I mentioned, at this point, I'd respond back and say like, hey, let's, here's my calendar link, and let's try to find a time when we can talk. I never send a pitch cold. So if you've ever tried to go in and, get the requirements and send over a number and you haven't talked with them, I see a very low close rate for when I've tried to do that. And what I'm trying to do from the very beginning is one, see how we're going to work together and have an understanding of their personalities. So at this point, I would jump on a call. And after that call, now I thought about like trying to say, maybe like pre-recording some of that or, getting a call with Pete. We've actually already had that call. And he's given us a little bit of the details of what he's trying to accomplish, which is, an interim update. It's a little bit of brand to build. And so at this point, we would move over into Screaming Frog. So Screaming Frog is a tool that has a horrible name, but it's a really good product. And so what I'll do here is I'll put in the URL and I'll run a report. And this allows me to see kind of like everything that they have currently. This is really good, as well as, oftentimes what we're going to be looking at is some type of migration, or at least knowing, what we, need to be aware of, even if we're going to be creating 301 redirects, things along those lines. I'll go in and at this point create an export and download this. I've downloaded it. I'm going to save everyone my messy downloads folder. And I've gone ahead and already opened that. But before I kind of move along too far, let me just take a break and, open it up to everyone here. I'm going to stop sharing. And just in terms of the overview here of what I'm going to be looking at, are there questions or things that people are sort of curious about before we really go down the rabbit hole of spreadsheets and evaluations and doing, technical audits and things along those lines? So I'd just love to really kind of open it up. And then at that point, I can get into more details.
Yeah, maybe I can get started. So I have, I think, two questions. So the first one is during the sale process, is just yourself, Mason, or do you usually include, like, for example, on a discovery or before you send like a proposal, do you have like designers, developers kind of jumping into calls just to make sure that everything is covered?
It depends. So mostly, and so it's actually Danielle and I that lead sales. I've actually handed over a lot of this work for Danielle, and she will then pull in people as needed that are going to go and kind of be subject matter experts. A lot of this stuff, especially early on, it's just about having an understanding of what their goal is and what they're trying to accomplish, doing a little bit around like trying to introduce some of the team. So I'll join her in some of those calls. Sometimes, Felix may join, or Lemmy, or things along those lines, just to, so that it's kind of a group interview type of scenario. But that's a good question.
Sounds great. I think that answers my both questions I had. So thank you.
Okay. And I think that gets into another question that I've often seen is, and I think I can't remember who had asked this to me recently, but how much do you go in and ask other people on your team how long that they think it will take? I've done that in my last agency. I don't do that now, and the reason is that people, as a rule, have a really tough time estimating their time. And so what we try to do instead is base our estimates on an average that we've been able to pull over the last 9 years of doing this work. So a lot of this stuff that we're selling, like, we've done it before, and then we can start to say what's going to be our fixed cost and what's going to be our variable cost, and kind of work between those two scenarios. And so that's one of the things that I'll be getting into. But what other questions? Hal, I know you've got a bunch of questions too. So what have you been tinkering with?
Just for the Screaming Frog tool, beyond 301 redirects, what other issues are you identifying that are going to make a big difference in the scope of the project?
Yeah, so good question. So one of the things that I'm trying to evaluate very early is, as I said, kind of fixed cost versus variable cost. So a one-page site can sometimes be as much work as a 5-page site. And, even though sometimes people are just it's just a landing page. I'm like, yeah, but we still have to set up all that stuff. And we're going to set up all of those core components. So I'll jump in now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each step, and then I'm going to take a step back and start to ask the group what questions that they have. And we'll go from there. So now we're going to get into the spreadsheets part, and I'm going to do my best. This is really getting into the live build part. Felix, Florencia, you may need to add a little bit of color here just to keep it lively as you're watching me write formulas. Also, Jasmine, good to see you. See you over there. So, all right, let's screen share here and jump into Let's jump into from Screaming Frog. So we've gone through, we've pulled this audit. This is all well and good. I bring this into numbers. So people have all sorts of programs that they like. I really like numbers, and I like it for a few different reasons, but one of which is that I can kern the type, I can control the outline width and do some coloring and things like that. It has all the same stuff that you would see in Excel as well. But what I want to do here is I'm going to come over, and so I can go in and I can look at my formatting, but I'm going to start to organize this. And the way that I'm going to organize this is I'm going to go over here to the categories, and I'm going to first, so I'm going to move this. I'm going to go in and organize it by my status codes. So I'm looking for status code 200 to see what I'm going to bring over. And then I have my 301s and my 302s. Within my status codes 200, then I'm going to do a second level here, which is I'm going to look at my content types. So this is going to give me a sense of like, what are my overall pages? Are there any kind of like, is there some JavaScript? It doesn't look like very much. Images. And then this is just sort of like garbage. I don't really need to worry about that, but I'm going to go ahead and close it down. And this is all within my 201s. I'm going to highlight this just so I can see it a little bit better. It's tough to see some of this with just the gray. So now I can see kind of like really where I'm trying to focus. I'm going to come into here. So into my text. So these are my core pages. And the first thing I can do is come over here and run a count. So I'm going to count all of these. And so I can see there's about 100 pages. I could also see that from Screaming Frog here. So Screaming Frog is going to tell me it's got 121. But this is why I kind of like to do this, because some of those 121, we don't need to worry about, or we need to think about how to do those differently. Now what I want to do is understand what's going to be a static page versus what's going to be a template. Again, this is going to get into some of that variability. A lot of those static pages are going to take just as long as the template pages. So while this is 100 pages, we don't need all of those. I have a little bit of this. So in terms of writing some simple formulas, and so, I've gone ahead and started on this. And what if I was to start first, the first thing I would do is and say, let's go in and get, I'll click equals here. And then I'm going to do a simple formula called text after. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply text after to this first cell. And then I'm going to search for the string, which is my slash. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to understand the directory. So I want to get the login. I want to see, are there article pages, like here's an article, things along those lines. What do I need to look at? And then I need to get the third occurrence of that. So it's 1, 2, 3 right after that. So I'm going to do this, what is that, quote, and then this, and then that's going to, it's going to give me my error. I guess, I needed to get the third occurrence, not that. So that's going to now recur this. Now, what you'll notice is that if I just try to do that, then it's not going to return anything right there. And then later on, it's going to be like a little messier. Like I don't need to see integration / Asana. I just want to go and get that first directory. So what I'm going to, the sort of next level up here, and I'll fast forward here, is the full formula is, this is where we started with text between, or I guess it was like text after. The next thing I would look at is doing text between. So I want to get the text just between these two brackets. So between the third bracket and then after the first bracket right here. It's a little funny how they do the numbering, but it's first bracket and then after this bracket, the second one after that. However, if I do this, if I run this on everything, I'll get an error. And so what I want to do to be able to address that error is I'll come up here and I've got just an additional formula that I'm going to include, which is if error, use the text between right here. And then if I'm not getting an error, I'm doing this. And if I am getting an error, I'm doing this text after. And so that should be able to cover everything. So quick formulas, I'll include this as a part of the download. So if you didn't totally get that, just know that that's how you're going to do it. All I have to do now is paste that. And now I have, kind of my cleaned up directories here. So the second thing I can do now is come back over here, come into my organize, and then add another filter here on the directory. So I'm just going to add that filter here. And then I can go back over here and then do the counts again. So I'm going to count these. And so should be some average count. I don't know why that's, I don't know. Oh, maybe it's trying to do, maybe there's like count. Did I just not do that right? Count all? Count, oh, here we are. Even with a demo, it's tough to be able to know. So now I can start to see, and I'm going to color code these, but here I can start to see a little bit around what is kind of a template versus a page and how this starts to look. So, for my integrations here, so this is like all the different, so I need to know that there is an integrations template. And the second thing I would do here is I'll go in, I'm going to add a column after this, and then now do type. And I would then put on these, like anything that has more than one, I would just tag this to say that it is a template, and anything that is a one page, then I know that that is a static page. So really quickly here, I can start to see, how am I looking with my, so if I was come up here, then I would do static pages, and I'm just going to guess. I'm not actually going to spend all the time counting it. Well, I guess I could 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So static pages, 11, and then template pages, and then here I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. So fairly straightforward. So this is going to be what is just a regular Webflow page, and then here is my CMS collection page. So that's going to give me some of this level of effort that now when we start to get into the project planning, we'll be able to bring that back out to them and say, okay, we anticipate a velocity of, our first couple pages are going to take the longest, and then, we're moving down to a velocity of about 1 page a day or half a page a day, things like that. If I really wanted to get granular, then I could go in and do level of effort per template page, kind of high, medium, or low, based on, 3 days, or, maybe whatever that increment might be for, like, maybe it's a week, maybe it's a half week, maybe it's a day, maybe it's, 3 days, a day, half day. Like, I think that's one of the things that as you look at your pacing and how you build, you can start to make those determinations. So this is going to give me a little bit of that variability. The next service that I like to use is called Built With. And so here's what I'll do, and I'll go through and I'll do a, so I've just entered in, so come over here to punch list or Built With, and I'll just do a lookup. This will give me all the technologies that are sort of included. I'll go in and typically capture these. I'll just copy and paste them and throw them into the document, and then I'll clean these up. So if I just come back over to here, then I'll go and create another spreadsheet, which is just like technologies. I'm going to just Shift Option Command V, so paste as whatever it is, like paste as style. Is that how you say edit? Paste and match style. Yeah, it's just so that it comes in a little bit easier. I could also, if I wanted to just clean this up afterwards, I could just do regular paste, and then this will give me the logos to come in here. And what I try to look at here is that as we're looking at the migration, and at the very, very beginning and at the very end, I want to see, okay, again, level of effort on these. How many of these is just a pixel we need to bring over? Okay, we have HubSpot forms. That can be a little bit complicated. And I'm able to go in and see like anything that's going to really require some, a level of effort versus things that I just need to be aware of. And so I'd go through and kind of do an evaluation of these things as well, and then include this in my, tech migration level of effort, and then based upon, so I could give each one of these sort of like a day count, or do some type of grouping to be able to understand what needs to happen with that migration. So here that total might be a total of 4 days, because a lot of this, it's like a day of just making sure that the pixels are in place, a couple days with a HubSpot form, and then some testing. So that's how I'm going through and understanding level of effort and scope for a site build along these lines. At the end of this, whenever we are getting ready to hand off, if there's 301s, things along those lines, and I can come back over here, make sure that we're capturing all of these, or if when we're going through the migration process, if we're going to kind of like rename some of these or update the sitemap, then we would continue to update this, so this becomes a bit of a living document as well as a way to start to grab that first scope. So I'm going to just take a step back here before we get into project planning. So let me stop sharing, and we'll grab some questions. So questions there around just getting a general level of effort? No? Felix, what do you think? You've been on the receiving side of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so useful, and it's the way that like the starting of checking all the project. I think is really important to know, because sometimes in the back end you don't realize how much pages they have. Templates, I think, is really important to have this knowledge before you can start pitching the client. Or I think it's really important. I think someone shared something in the chat, isn't it?
So I think Fernando had asked if this was similar to a different product.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. Fernando, it's a pretty similar tool that you can use this one as well. So I don't know if anybody here has any question related with this topic or something else.
Just regarding the table that Mason was pulling up, like the latest one, I noticed that there is one column, I think is what the one most on the right, that says last seen or something like that. And I can see that some tools are kind of, the last seen date is like 2016 or something like that. Does that mean that the tool is, maybe that integration is not existing anymore?
Exactly. And so this is something that, before we hand over, the final budget or things along those lines, we might work with them on this. And the other thing I think that it helps to do, because some of this is like, hey, it hasn't been updated since, 2019, or, we don't need a lot of this stuff. I think it helps to create a sense of confidence that like we're looking at, what's going on. And in our response, I will actually, so the way that I will respond back to a client is I'll actually walk through the full process, and I'll say like, hey, when we were looking at your work, the first thing we did is we pulled the Screaming Frog report. We looked at your migrations. We're estimating or kind of assuming that these are the ones that are going to come over. Is that feel about right? And then kind of get them either saying yes or helping us to better understand like what we need to look at or update.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? No? All right, we'll keep rolling. All right, second part here, project planning. So now what we want to do is we have a sense of general scale, like, the effort that we're going to be working on. We've pulled our audit here. And so now let's get into a little bit of project planning. We use ClickUp, and we have a few different templates. I will just kind of, I don't have this. I think this is just so we have some templates. So this is a brand to build template. This is like, different projects that we have kind of in the works. And, if I had like a Webflow only project, then I could, work from that one. But what this does is it has some of the general work streams that we would be taking on as part of this type of project. And then I will, or Danielle will go in and then start to extend out, the effort on these based upon what we just pulled. So, sitemap and site outline, like generally these are types of activities that are going to be repeatable for, let's say a 1 to 500 page site. Where we really start to get into some of the nuts and bolts is in the wireframes, the page production, and in Webflow development. So on the wireframes, we may want to pull this out. So this is only about a week and a couple days worth of time. If we're looking at a really big site, then we'll go through and give ourselves a little bit more time. In some of this, it's the extent of how granular you want to get. When we get into the design production, we actually get very granular, and we start to say, these are going to open up here in a minute. So into the content production and design production, we're going to get very granular and almost do like a page per day type of approach. And some of these are, you have to excuse me, ClickUp is taking a minute to load. But effectively what we'll do is we will have each line item here be representative of a page. And then we will go and then estimate out, that page. So same type of thing. I can either, in terms of my pace, I can do it individually per line item, or I can do them out separately. But this is, here we go. So for a page build, if I'm looking at back over here, I'm just going to come back to my back of the napkin. So I'm looking at about 11 days for, so let's say like I'm going to do a velocity of 1 page per day. Maybe it's 2 pages per day or 1.5 pages per day. I'll just say it's 1.5 pages per day. And I'm just going to do a quick multiplication on this and say like, okay, about 16.5 days. Template pages, I'm going to say that's at 1 page a day. And then my technology, I'm going to do that at 1 day per bit of technology. So this is going to give me just a quick, like, about 24 days. So I can come back over into here, jump into my project plan. This is really, I'm just focusing on the Webflow build to kind of like make sure that we've got enough time to be able to go through everything. But I would do like this fixed cost versus variable cost would apply to content production. It's going to apply to wireframes, and then it's going to apply to my Webflow build. So here, as I get into Webflow, I'm going to drag this out to maybe 24 days so that I've got enough time in here. And this starts to give me, I've got that time for my UI setup, my header, footer, nav, my UI system creation. And I don't know. Oh, we may need to, I think we're getting some echo here. If you just want to mute unless you have a question. I do love questions though. So here I've just kind of pulled this out, but it's not pulling out. I don't know if my internet's not connecting or what's happening here, but I would pull this out to the appropriate amount of days, and then that's going to give me my appropriate effort. The next thing that I can do is I'll come up and look at the table view. And so within the table view here, this should have levels of effort based upon the time spent here in my time estimate. And I might want to go in and do like a little bit of cleanup in here, but this should have a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be working with. And so the next thing I'll look at doing is I'll export this. I'm going to export my view. I'm going to export it as a CSV or Excel if you just want to get out the Excel document, and then download that. So I'll download that document and now jump back into Numbers. Oop, let me find Numbers. And let's see, where's my Numbers document with this? I've started to download it. So here it is within Numbers. So this is my full project. These are all of my activities. And then this is my time estimate for each one of those activities. Some of them don't have a time estimate associated with them. So we have these things like client feedback windows that we go ahead and build in. We're not charging them for those feedback windows, but we do want to account for it in the project schedule so that we know, oh, it's going to be 3 days from this day to this day. Any questions as kind of like, I know I kind of talked about a good bit just right there, kind of moving from ClickUp, first working in the Gantt chart view, getting that project designed, and then, from there, exporting that out to an Excel document or to a CSV. So just real quick, any questions there?
No question, anybody? We can continue, I guess.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
so I'm going to jump back into, we're now in our numbers document. And this is a document that I will show the client. I will show them both this top line as well as this full thing over here. You have to be careful multiplying by a time estimate. So what you do is you do a strip duration, and then strip duration is going to, as it takes out the duration, and then it reduces that down to 1, but then is a fraction, and so then I multiply that by, or let's see, oh, I guess that is coming down to 1. But this is coming in as 1 day instead of 1 hour, and that's not what I want. So, and if I was to come over here, I don't want this at 4 hours. This is coming in at, this is really 4 days. So I just go and multiply this 1 day by 24 so that I can now understand that this is 24 hours and this is 100 hours and this is going to be 0 hours, but I'll do this for all of them. So that'll allow me to go in and get my full hours. And then rates are like a whole other thing. For right now, I'm just going to do $3 an hour. They're getting quite the deal. And then depending upon what your currency is, who knows? But I'm just going to go and put that in for right now. I've thought about doing a different session which dives into the nuts and bolts of like how to get to your hourly rate and how to think about it being, both an element that is competitive within the market and then making sure that you're charging enough but not charging too much. Some of this is just like, there's a little bit of gut in here. There's a little bit of like understanding, where you are from a competition standpoint, understanding where things are going, but just whatever you have within there. And the other thing that I'll do is sometimes have different rate cards based upon who is working on what. So that is like a whole, like as we think about crawl, walk, run here, there's ways to make this really, really complicated. I'm trying to go in and show just sort of the basics. And then, you can take these and really start to incorporate aspects into your own workflow or not. I think it's just like, frameworks within Webflow, they're all very personal. And it's a question on like what works for you and what's kind of like, what's going to get the job done for your use case. But just then the next thing is I'm going to go and do a total here. So just going to do rate times hour. And then that's going to give me, my totals per line item. And I guess if I wanted to make this like, we'll just go and make it 10 just so that it starts to calculate into something a little bit more like what you would see in a project. And then the next thing I'm going to do just in terms of organizing this is I'm going to organize it by deliverable. And so I'm going to say, I'm going to just grab the, I have my milestone here. And so I'm going to grab my, this for my sitemap. I'm going to grab my brand design directions here. And I'm just kind of going through. I'm sure there's other fancier ways to be able to do this. This is wireframes. And then I'm going to do content production over here. So you'll see why in just a moment. And then we have site design directions. We have design production and Webflow development over here. Also, just in terms of, this is getting, a little bit more in the weeds, but for all of our tasks, we end up doing we'll have some type of 3-letter abbreviation for the client name. This is something so that later on, after these tasks get assigned out to the team and they're working on things, they just know like, just by looking at the task, like, oh, this is an EA task, or if this was for punch list, then we would have it say PUN for punch. So just like so that people know that there is a really easy way to have an understanding of like what that that deliverable is. So I'm going to remove that for right now. But now what I can do is come over here. I'm going to go back over to organize, and I'm going to organize these by deliverable, which I can't spell, but you guys get the idea here. So I'm going to do by deliverable. I'm going to turn on my categories again and then do by deliverable, and that will automatically organize them. And then I can come over here into my totals and do sum. And so that's going to give me my totals per item. I can then come over here and I'll do an overview because, if I'm talking with people about this, I don't want them to get lost. I want to be able to address the, what we're doing very quickly. And then from there, be able to kind of support it with the additional documentation here. Again, and then what I'll have is that when I send this over to them, this is part of the package. And so I'm going to do content production here, design directions, and design production. And then now to get my totals, I'm just going to come over. I'm going to grab my totals, same thing. So, and I can start to total these up right over here. So just go in and do sum, grab the full. Oh, let me make sure I'm not summing my sum. That's a problem. So sum over here. Sorry, I'm summing my sum. So I need to go grab it from right here. It keeps jumping down here. So I'm going to do it from right over here. Sometimes you just can't win. So so as I'm putting this together, it will start to. So I'll go in and grab my wireframes. We'll grab my content production. Same thing. So this is the part where I was like, hey, we may need to have some color commentary from Felix or whoever else. But anyway, we'll just go in and I'll not worry about these for right now. But the other thing that I will go and do is I will go and grab the first date right over here. So I'm going to grab this and I will have this as the start date. And then I will add a few more rows over here. And then I will do an end date, which is my last day right over here. So April 27th. And what this allows me to do is that whenever I'm talking with, the group, I will say two different things here. One is like, hey, these are the activities that we're going to be doing. Here's how we're budgeting for those activities. This is when we're going to be starting. This is when we're going to be ending, so that they can get a sense of like, okay, this is about, a 4-month project, 5-month project. This is the type of feedback windows that we have, so that we have in here about a 3 to 5 day feedback window, and really be able to get a lot of that information together in one place. And then again, whenever we review this with them, I'll also review the sitemap document over here in parallel. So now this is like very technical. And there's two ways that people buy. There is an emotional sell and a functional sell. And so what I try to do is address both of those whenever I'm talking with anyone. So the next thing I'm going to do is get into more of like that emotional side of the equation. But before I do, I'd love to just kind of like address any questions or thoughts that people might have on getting into this part, which is really the nuts and bolts of that first bit of the estimate.
I think it's really important to, Mason, as you said, like split every step of the project, not only for our agency, but also for our freelance, not only for organize, but also for estimate. And this is something that we sometimes struggle. Where I was working, for example, for as a freelance, my first proposal was like, Webflow development or design and development. But it's really important to clarify to the client all the steps and detail all this, all the steps essentially for agency, but also for a freelance, because otherwise it's like, how many changes can you make? Like you need to detail all this stuff, because otherwise you're going to waste time and you're going to lose money at the end of the day.
That's a big thing. Is a lot of times people will just estimate on this bar right here, and they'll say like, all right, about 24 pages. So let's say 24 days or, whatever. But then, there won't be time in there for internal QA. So this is time that we're charging for, time for the client to do QA, for them to be able to submit tickets, and then for us to be able to update those. And then, for us to be able to have that sort of final handoff and support. So these are different activities that we're sort of sandwiching between, this one deliverable. And then if we look at it, in more scale, then we can start to say like, okay, over the course of this the duration of this this project, here's all of the stuff that we're going to be doing from, again, this is from brand to build, and just what, over a 5-month project, like how does that start to really look? But again, the same thing if we were just doing Webflow only. And I think even for Felix, for this project, we're going to do a little bit of design production, what I would say is sort of a design tune-up, and then get into build. So we're probably going to be right around here. We'll actually be able to do it a little bit faster because you're quite fast. But the other thing I would say is don't estimate based on the fastest person on your team. Estimate based on a an average or target run rate for development. Sound good?
Any question about this topic? Anybody that?
Yeah, Diego?
Yeah. Mason, just one question. Are you approaching, or are you kind of talking next about how you present this to the client?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will wait for my question next.
Yeah. And so this is, again, like a lot of this stuff, no one really talks about. I'm really excited to be able to have this conversation with everybody. And yeah, this has been kind of, I'd say, as our secret sauce a little bit. So this is, if I was to think about when I'm talking with a client, so I'm going to talk with the client right here, and I'm going to make sure that I can qualify them. Because as you can see, putting together a response, it's a whole lot of work. And depending upon who I'm working with, at some point, sometimes I will just go and show the spreadsheet. I won't actually go to this next step. And what I'll do is I'll email, and I won't email them the spreadsheet. I will email them to say like, hey, or actually what it is I will, respond back, qualify them. And then while I'm on the call with them, I'll say like, hey, well, let's set up a next time for us to talk and go through our project plan. It's good for two different things. One of which is it gives me a timeline, because if I don't have a timeline, I'm probably just going to it'll sit out there in the whatever, and I won't get to it. But it'll also make sure that they're, they've already sort of committed to it. So we don't have to go back and forth on calendars and things like that. And so it's really kind of at that point where I will make the call and either just review with them the spreadsheet and this document and let kind of a lot of our outstanding work or kind of current work speak for itself. But if it's a really, if it's more competitive or a little bit bigger job, then that's when I'll get into creating a full response site. And this is our actual response site. So if you want to see how we have been responding now, the reason why I don't totally mind sharing this is we're about to change everything. So, yeah, this is our response site. And a lot of people send this over in a PDF. I love to talk about doing a Webflow project immediately from Webflow. And whenever I'm presenting, then I will actually present from Webflow, and I get to say the line, not only am I the president, but I'm also a user. No, but I'll say hey, this whole presentation that you've been going through, it's actually been in Webflow. Again, I send nothing over cold. I review everything on the call with them because I want to be able, if there's an objection or anything that I need to be able to address, I want to address that right here and use this as more of a supporting material. I have this stuff organized as shared symbols, and I also have different templates that I've built into here. So these are my different RFP templates. I have a venture capital template, an RFI template, a really detailed response, a hospitality template, and a B2B response. I have 5 pages that I typically do within each one: a cover letter, a firm overview, project approach, technology overview, case studies, and rates and fees. So that's really the sort of full kit and caboodle. Sometimes I'll leave out the technology overview. And then for the case studies, I will have more detail than I would typically have on our website because I want to be able to sometimes tune that up for whoever I'm looking to talk with. So if I was to come over here, I'll just be able to, I can start to update these. So I can come over, this is a shared symbol. I can say, okay, punch list, Edgar Allan response. IST. Now, there are ways that I'm sure that I could have one form that I use to update everything. The other thing I like to tell people that whenever I'm, on a call with them, I often say Webflow is so easy, even the account team can use it. So me as more of an account person that is savvy within Webflow. And then I've got, hey, thanks for inviting us to share our work with you. Punch, P-U-N-C-H-L-I-S-T. You guys can see like all of my my struggles with spelling here, but I'll just leave that for right now. A little bit of overview about us, and then kind of signed from me. And then at the bottom here, I just have like our firm overview and then kind of a jump link to the individual sections. If I was to come into those sections, for us as an overview, talking about like, we combine brand strategy with responsive web design to help you communicate with your customers, a little bit about who we've worked with, our old office back when we had one, and then, how we approach the work with story first. The browser comes in a close second, so it's not just about the technology, and that every successful web project is also a content project. So that's really kind of, I just want to hit them with sort of like 3 things on what makes us different, how we work. And then at this point, I get into our project approach. So because I've gone in and kind of standardized our project approaches, what I can do is use this template here. And for some reason, my bar here didn't get updated, or maybe it did. No, it hasn't gotten updated. Sometimes this stuff can be a little bit touchy because you're making a site here. But instead of just showing the team, what I like to do is help them envision this very technical project plan with people next to it. So I'll say like, hey, we're going to start off with Zane. He's going to start off with wireframes. This is what we're going to do as we get into kind of like the overarching planning and project planning. Account management here is going to be who's working on it. And then we get into the Webflow build, and John and Lemmy are going to be working on that. And Kendall will be doing some design production and then quality assurance, and then you're off to the races. When I'm on the call with them, I will not read everything. I will just kind of talk through this and use this as a way to be able to add a bit of narrative, and then going back and forth between this and this. So I'll say, hey, I've got a great project plan for us to look at today, but I don't want to dive into those details yet. Let's go in and talk really high level, and I will send this to you right after the call so that you've got a chance to be able to look at it. Into the project samples. So this is where what I've done here is I've started to standardize this. These actually don't have any in here right now, but I've abstracted them into a series of elements. So if I wanted to go in here and I can just say like, all right, let me, I'm going to add my Coke case study. Let me pull this up because that is now between where it's not supposed to be. Oh. And, dragging some stuff around in here. And so I'm starting off first with, let me pull this up above my Coke case study. So project examples, I'm going to have this, and then I'll go in and say like, all right, maybe Coke, maybe one that we've done for shoot proof. And so that just gets added right to the bottom there. And then maybe another one we have done for Excel. So these are, kind of all of our case studies. They're all kind of lined up right here. They're all, I've got my client testimonials, people that they can talk with, all in one place. And so then the next thing I'll do is now go into my rates and fees. Again, this setup right here maybe takes, now that we've got everything sort of worked out, maybe a half hour to an hour, depending upon how focused I am. But here's where I'll go in and put our rates and fees, and I'll just copy and paste over that information that came from, this spreadsheet, so that whenever I'm walking people through, the last thing I'll end on is like, okay, here we are. I'll always kind of mention that we're going to link out to the full export, so I can kind of go back and forth there. And, that they feel that they have sort of full control over their project. So, all right, let me stop screen sharing. And then the next thing I'll talk about is just like that kind of pitch process and, sort of what happens after that. Diego, does that kind of answer your question there?
Yeah.
It did.
Awesome.
We have a question from Theo here that say, will the proposal live under the directory of EA website? No. Well, I mean, is
so
that
I have it as a
password?
subdomain. Yeah, I have it as a subdomain, and then I password protect it. And then I send over that password whenever I send it over. The other thing that I love is that if we don't win it, then I take the response down. So it's not just my numbers sitting out there. Because the thing that I hate is like maybe I send a response, I don't hear someone back, they email back a year later and like, oh, here in this PDF, it says that you're going to do this for $500. And I'm like, well, our rates are changed. We have a bigger team, like, whatever that might be. So I have full control over the response from the very beginning to the end. And the same thing for the numbers document, because it's shared, I can take that down if we don't win it.
Cool. Anybody has questions related with that? Diogo?
Yeah, me, of course. And sorry, it's not related to this phase. Yeah. It's related to like the first phase where we are kind of qualifying the client. And sorry for going back again to the whole process, but since this is a lot of work to get done before, like to a client, for example, that has not the budget, not even close to what we are proposing. Do you have any type of questionnaire before you jump into the first call? Like just kind of to assess like budget, timeline, if it's like even close to the team availability, team budget, or is straight into the call?
That's a great question. It really depends upon where it's coming from. And, so if someone's emailing me from their Gmail, red flag. If they, say they want something really fast, red flag. If they haven't really put much thought into their request, red flag. And, sometimes I'll ask for a little bit more information, typically right now, and it really depends upon your lead volume. We don't have what I would say is we actually have probably like a low lead volume, where we might get in, 1 to 5 leads a week, something along those lines. And, you can tell pretty quickly where those are starting to net out. So getting on the call, I will try to ask a few different questions, one of which is ultimately it ladders up to 2 main ideas. What's your goal and what's your budget? And sometimes, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to tell you my budget. And then what I'll do at that point is that I will tell them what is our back of the napkin run rate. And so I'll say like, okay, your goal is to do a Webflow migration. Our back of the napkin sort of Webflow migration is anywhere from like 3 to 6 weeks. And then we staff that with anywhere from 1.3 to 2.1 people. And they'll say, what's that mean? And so what that really is that is one person that is full-time dedicated to the project, plus some time for a project manager. And so that is that 0.3 or 0.1. And so that might be for the Webflow portion of that. And then I will say, the back of the napkin of this is, so the back of the napkin is I want to tell them what our run rate is per week. And that will just be our hourly multiplied by 40. And so I'll say like, okay, our run rate per week is, let's say, 500 euros per week or whatever it might be. And so I try to do it like really broad picture. And then I'll say, is that kind of where you're, trying to invest? And if they say like, yeah, that sounds about right, then, we'll move forward. If not, then I've just saved myself a whole lot of time of like going through and like pulling the report and seeing all this stuff and like really getting into the nitty gritty of like what we should be investing. I would say also for someone that doesn't know their budget, red flag, because they don't have a sense of what they need to do to invest within a type of project like this. And so, and sometimes they'll have a range of a budget and they'll say, $500 to $1,000. And I'll be like, okay, well, and then, sometimes I will get a budget within an email and I'll say like, hey, thank you so much for your response. I always respond back or thank you so much for your email. That's not a budget that we typically take on, but let me go in and help you find someone that can address that budget. I actually take, for a long time, so Danielle leads this now, but as a company, what we typically do is we jump on every single call that if someone is, if it's not, if we haven't like marked red flags, we'll jump on every single call. And for anyone that is not a good fit, then I offer 2 different things. One of which is that I offer to join their search committee. So I'm saying, hey, that's not a fit for us. But as you're talking with people, I'll help you evaluate the proposals and see like who might be a good fit, and I will refer people over to you. that's actually a really good thing for me, because what it allows for is like, now all of a sudden I get to see rates for other people that are submitting in. In fact, I've seen all the rates for every single, for the main companies that are in the experts program, and a lot of people that are within the partner program. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. It's just, it's like, if you start to offer value to someone and start to offer a way to be able to add a sense for who's going to be a good fit, and do that from a point of like, trying to help, you'd be surprised what type of information that you can learn. Also, if you do win a pitch, something that you can ask for that very few people do is say like, hey, I'd love to see the other responses and see where they netted out. A lot of times people will send those, sometimes they won't. Do that after you're signed, after you've signed the project. And then same thing if you don't win, then I will ask like, hey, great, thanks so much for inviting us in. We really enjoyed learning about your company. Would you mind sharing who the winning agency was and what their budget was that they came in with? And sometimes they'll share that, and sometimes they won't. You can also ask, if you don't feel like asking for just the budget, you can ask to have a call to better understand where they, how the process went for them, and what was the decision criteria like, and how could you be a better next time in a response to someone. And a lot of times that, just from sort of a point of being helpful, they'll come in and give you just a ton of information, a ton that you can learn from not winning. So you might go through this, but still be able to have an opportunity to learn a lot.
Yeah, in a way, you are always winning, even when you lose.
Yeah.
And we are doing that next week with one lead that we lost, and
Yeah.
we actually asked why they kind of choose with another person. And with that, we did that quite a few times, and we always learned something.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes it's tough because you're like, oh, I think we could have done better, or whatever. And I think it's just trying to approach it from a point of like the mindset that I try to channel whenever I'm doing sales. And I would say that two things: sales is about learning your voice, so it's about learning like, there's a functional side of all of this stuff that I'm talking about today, which I hope is helpful. And then there's the other part of this, which is about learning your voice. And that voice is just like, how you're going to pitch, what you're offering, like how you approach things, things like that. And I think for me, I spent 6 years at my last agency, 9 years at Edgar Allan. I have got a good sense of just like pitch and reading, Zoom calls now and things like that. But well, maybe just for a couple more minutes, what I can do now is I will back out really quickly and just tee up what happens if we win. And so I'm going to just show really quickly an example of our MSA and statement of work and how we approach this. So I'm going to screen share here. I'm actually not going to unpack the document, and this can be a teaser for a separate video where we talk about what does an MSA mean? What should you be looking out for? And what is the structure of your statement of work? I would say the big thing that we try to do is, as you saw, is we're trying to bake in as many assumptions as possible into that project plan, all the way from the very beginning within the spreadsheet. And then that spreadsheet ladders up to a budget. And then that budget ladders up to a series of assumptions that we're going to put into our statement of work. And then that statement of work is going to be bound by a start and an end date. And then that start and end date, if we start to go outside of that, then we submit a change order. Or if we get outside of, like, if we need to have 4 rounds of review instead of 3 rounds of review, then we submit a change order to be able to either charge for that additional change, or it's kind of a shot across the bow to be able to say like, hey, out of bounds here. I guess in soccer or football, it would be like yellow card. So I kind of pull a yellow card and say that, hey, let's just so this is an extra thing that we're doing. And we're doing that in the investment of this project. But that way, if it is continued behavior, then you can say like, okay, well, we're going to do this as a zero-sum change order on the first one. And then on the second one, we will actually be charging you a rate. And we bake those rates into our spread, into our contracts. So also my wife is sitting off camera somewhere, and she's probably like, don't show them contracts. So I'm going to come in here. So we have our template document here. This is for our statement of work. And so a statement of work, you can think about it being organized kind of like a sandwich. So there's the bread on the top, there's bread on the bottom, and all the stuff in the middle. All the stuff in the middle is your deliverables, and that's what we've been estimating all along. And this is also a part of the sales process. The master services agreement is absolutely part of the sales process and absolutely part of the negotiation process. This covers all of our general terms, everything that we need to be able to kind of cover within an engagement. I can talk about the things that we want to make sure that we've got in there, but the big one is, limitation of liability. We have no deliverable acceptance or deliverable approval. We only have deliverable acceptance. We then define out that deliverable acceptance within days, as opposed to a formal email or things along those lines that come across. And then, from there, it's just a series of like other things that we want to look out for. Like we want to make sure that we have jurisdiction within Atlanta, Georgia, for law and for venue. So that's just something to look out for there. And then we send it over via DocuSign. I kind of hate paying for DocuSign, because what we're doing is like, you could do this over Preview, Apple Preview, or just like sign it and scan it back in. But this makes sure that, one, that there is continuity within the document that we send over. The other thing is that we find that there's less negotiation if we send it over DocuSign. People feel like, oh, well, it's in DocuSign, and then they sign it. So that's been kind of a recent addition, but something that's been really helpful. So yeah, that is like our new business process from first email through contract and signature. So I appreciate everyone sticking around. Love to know any other questions. We've had a great group here. Diego, awesome. I think it's the first time I've seen you. I know we've gone back and forth on Twitter and we've talked before, but I haven't, you had your camera off last time. So yeah, but just love to get any other questions before we close.
Can I ask one question, Mason?
Yeah, absolutely, Hal.
I'll put it in the chat. What do you think about putting a term like this in the contract about saying for like web accessibility, we'll do our best, but if you get sued for 50K, we're not responsible?
So I would want to have a lawyer look at that. That's what my lawyer would tell me to tell you. For what I would say is that in terms of limitation of liability, our projects do not exceed the cost of the project. And we do not indemnify within our projects. So we offer no indemnification. Something that'll happen a lot of times within an MSA is that they'll keep all the main stuff and then they'll say, oh, except for section 13. And then that section 13 will go and include an indemnification that basically negates all of your limitation of liability. So watch out for people trying to say, oh, well, we're just going to make sure that we'll do that, but you just have to make sure you've indemnified us and warranted the work that it's not going to do anything like that.
Great.
So I think it's a good thing to have and a good thing to be able to call out within the assumptions. But the bigger thing is limitation of your liability across the project.
Well, any other question, guys? Any concern that you have from this process? Nobody else? Well, I think it was really helpful, Mason. I learned a lot as well. I know. Okay. I mean, I'm not part of the process, but not the whole process. Yeah. And I think it's really important because we get a lot of questions from Webflow Cafe as well. Hey, how you freelance? How you charge? How the proposal to the clients? Because at the end of the day, you can learn Webflow is something that you have so many information out there, and but the start agency, start a freelance business is other thing. So I think it's really important. And also, we were mentioning about the rates, the rating and the pricing and stuff. I think we can deep dive a little bit more in another episode and talk about, because at the end of the day, any person have their expenses, so it's different. We cannot. This is not a real path, let's say. So yeah, we can talk about that or make a calculator so we can help the people to estimate their pricing for projects.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I think it's just trying to look at, across the board. What I would say is, for the first 2 years we were in business, we didn't have a website, and what I actually did, and I had friends that had super fancy websites and were doing super fancy work. I sold with a spreadsheet on all of my calls. And that spreadsheet, because a lot of times the secret is that as creatives, we value the creative work and the output, and we love that work. But our buyers are buying, like, they're numbers people, they're business people. And so if we can start to break down this into a number, like that's what all of this is about. It's a little bit of pageantry to be able to say, this is how I got to that number. Then you can start to build that confidence that they know not only are you going to get, you're sort of at the table because of your work, but if you can build that confidence that what you're charging is based upon something that is objectable, then that's where they will go in and invest within you and your project. So
yeah,
just
transparency is key. Is key as well.
Yeah. I love this, and what I can do is I can send out our numbers document right after this that has some of the formulas. I would say that, again, the Screaming Frog, Built With, these are all really great tools to help understand some of your fixed costs versus variable costs. Variable costs are what are going to get you. Trying to, account for, this is a blended team of how you're going to work with your client, and making sure that you've got time in there for feedback sessions, delays, whatever, all the stuff that kind of goes back and forth within one of these. So great to be able to have everyone here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I will say that we are going to upload in our YouTube channel. This series we are going to do every 2 weeks. So if you have any topic that you would like to talk about, so we are open to do it. And all the spreadsheets or documents that Mason have been talking about, we are going to leave probably in the description of the video. We are going to share in our Twitter account. So thank you so much for everybody to joining us today. And if you have any other questions before there's no anybody?
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's great to see everyone. I'll see you on Twitter.
Okay. See you guys.
Okay.
Everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.